Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all for this second episode, uh, which is also streaming live on YouTube as well. And this is a part of our series of E-Kutumbs, which we organized this year. And we've already had the first episode where we had Mr. Prashant Kapoor from IFC, and we also had Ashok Lal, who's a leading green architect. In that first session of episode, we spoke about the general scenario of buildings that spoke about the various scenarios of the construction and what's happening globally. Prashant gave the global view, and Ashok Lal gave the local perspective of green affordable housing. So we have been always very keen to put two things together. One is having the green buildings there, but what is it that it makes? What will make these green buildings into reality? So that's how this E-Kutumb program has also evolved. And we realized that the policy and the green finance ecosystem is actually a prerequisite for making green affordable housing into reality. And today I'm actually honored to have to conducting this panel, which is a very, very esteemed panel, which has three leading gentlemen from their various affairs and who have showcased extreme criticality in where we are. I welcome Mr. S.K. Hota. He's the MD, National Housing Bank. I welcome Sean Kidney from Climate Bond Initiative and Mr. Saurabh Kumar of EESL. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of this. So now, without further ado, we would just play one small AV to encompass our story. And so please, can I have the AV, please? Thank you very much. So this is just encompasses a bit about journey of Kutumb, what's happening around by the government of India as well, and how ESL has been a fabulous story. I think in spite of the gloom of this pandemic, it has had its own positives as well. I think had it not been an E-Kutumb, I'm sure to have all of you three together, or actually to have three of you at all at any of our Kutums, would have been impossible. So I think there are always positive fallouts for this, and so I think there are green shoots of pandemic as well. Uh, as we get on the outset of this panel discussion today, uh, I think the current COVID situation has really magnified the criticality of housing. I was just reading a report in US which said that the with the high density areas, the demand for housing has fallen. In the areas which has high density of housing has fallen. So which clearly is such a big point which points us to a country like ours, where the people who are in the EWS and LIG category or lower are staying in extreme congested areas with extreme high density, which don't have the requisite facilities with them, right? I think Housing for All as a program was an umbrella program, which obviously is going to provide shelter. But I think in the advent of providing shelter, it's also enabling people to move out of these kind of homes to better, newer homes with the more prevalent technologies and more prevalent standards of living. But that's not enough. Are those houses which are getting built are all commensurate or in light with uh, in sync with the green standards or not? And what is it? Because as they say, as Prashant Kapoor in the last episode said, that whatever we're going to create now is going to stay for next 70, 80 years. So, and in India, the story is about 30, 40% of Indian housing is yet to be built. So you can imagine that what gets built now, what it's going to be like and stay like that for the next 70, 80 years, because it's not going to be redone. I think India, on the other side, on an overall basis, I think has taken a kind of a pole position on the climate change, especially under the current government. If you look at various programs like the International Solar Alliance, today has headquarters in India, actually in the NCR region. So we are one of the largest producers of solar power. So we have seen that we have taken strides on the energy sector. And I'm sure Mr. Saurav Kumar, ESL is one absolute jewel in the crown on that subject, which we'll talk later. Mobility has been another area where the government has taken initiatives on the mobility side of ensuring that the e-mobility, again, ESL has played a role there on the e-mobility as well. And there are certain standards which have come into play, which have to be adhered to, right? And it was very heartening to see yesterday RBI even disclosed the new PSL, priority sector guidelines. Yesterday came from RBI, which also focused the changing the criteria as a bit more flexible towards renewable energy. People are going to be, and the loans which are going to be extended to farmers for solar usage or compressed biogas. So all these things are in the right direction to make it happen. But unfortunately, I feel that housing is one subject which possibly because of the complexity and the granular and the, I would say, heterogeneous nature of it, it lacks a lot of aspects. Maybe we'll talk about this a bit further as we go along. But I would like to first call upon Sean Kidney. And I think, as I was telling him before this start of this panel discussion, that I met him first time on a one presentation which he made in London on the Climate Bond Initiative presentation, and the kind of energy and the kind of enthusiasm and the passion he got created in that opening presentation of that conference was quite amazing. And ever since, I've tried to follow him in various aspects of what they've been doing and try to learn from it. Maybe 2 years back, I was at a level 0. Today, I would say I'm at a level of 30 to 40, and most of it goes to Climate Bond. Right, still a long way to go. So Sean is an Australian, and he's been in the segment of, he's currently also a consultant of green bonds to the United Nations Secretary General. He's part of most of the, I would say, a lot of sovereign governments as well, where he plays an active role on the advisory panel with countries like China, Canada. He's been playing a very pivotal role, and he when the Paris climate thing got going, there was a need for the financing ecosystem. And for the financing ecosystem, you needed some standards and you needed somebody to certify that this is falling under that. And that's how CBI was born. And so it is, as I said, it's extremely important to have benchmarks. And then against the benchmark, we know what are we supposed to do. So I welcome you, Sean, and thank you so much for agreeing to come over. I'm sure you're a extremely busy person, and I'm sure why I was so confident was because you have so much of energy and passion, you won't mind touching India as well, maybe virtually. So off to you, Sean, to give us a global perspective and tell us that what's happening in the world, and then I'll have some question on the Indian context. Off to you, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, Monu, for those very kind words, and thank you for the honor of inviting me to speak at this event, particularly with such illustrious colleagues on this panel. It's a great pleasure to be sharing with Mr. Kumar and Mr. Ratra. I'm going to talk a little bit about this global movement around green bonds and green finance, the potential benefits and utilizations for Indian entities in the housing sector, and then some thoughts on pandemic recovery, which of course is top of the mind for all of us at the moment, given the impact that it's having on our loved ones, but also on our economies and our societies. We need to be, now, the conversation we had a couple of years ago was as the market was beginning to get going, and I still remember that group we did to talk about leadership activities around the world. Yeah. It's gone very successfully since then as a global market on green bonds, but there is a bit of a background to it. Let me start off with why this exists, this idea of green finance and going forward. So clearly in countries like India, we have some extraordinary energy access challenges that we have to get to in terms of getting people access to low-cost energy to improve their lives and housing at the same time. I mean, I think the government's commitment is 11 million urban houses in the near future, just under the PMAY scheme. So we've got a lot to do to give people just a reasonable standard of living as part of our development goals anyway. If we can get the energy costs down by building energy efficient homes, that means lower OPEX for those people who then move to air conditioning. They've still got ESL's low-cost air conditioning or very efficient air conditioning, but the better the home is, the less air conditioning you need and the less power you need. So we've got to be thinking about these, particularly in a world where climate change is beginning to impact. India is going to get hotter. We've already seen some extraordinary instances the last few years of heat waves across northern India, which are historically abnormal. These things are going to get worse over the next 20 years. We need to be very conscious of building housing stock that will make lives good ones going forward, which means we need to be looking to the future, not just the past, to understanding what that means. The key to this is energy efficient homes. And of course, energy efficiency appliance and aspect too. So the benefit from the point of view of the climate change aspect is not only preparing for the climate change that is happening now and being to come through, but also by reducing energy usage and reducing the drain on the energy system, especially from the high carbon energy sources that we have in India using coal and gas and so on, we are able to get emissions down. If we get emissions down, we manage to take out the worst of the future likely changes. And I call it in this pandemic time, inoculating against catastrophic climate change, which India and most tropical countries will not be able to survive very well. So I know it's a rather big picture, but it is important to note that globally, this is what's going on. We have a very clear message from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, of which India is a member, that on current trajectories of climate change, we face a very dire future. And the people who will be most impacted by those are people in places like India and Indonesia and Africa, with India being the country, I think, most exposed to the dangers of climate change. So from the point of view of international investors, of course, what that means, they're starting to rethink what they do with their portfolios. First, they're looking forward and they're thinking what kind of assets will be less impacted by climate change than other sorts of assets. In the housing sector, energy efficient property is seen as a positive one, but the other side of it is policy. So it's clear from the international investor community that governments are beginning to act in many places. I mean, of course, India has already acted on the renewable energy front with ambitious goals set by the government in the area of renewable energy and energy efficiency, as embodied by ESL's work in the area, which are policy initiatives to change the Indian economy. Most investors expect more of these to come through, and they expect assets and projects that are not consistent with what governments are trying to do to be less attractive going forward and sometimes to disappear. This is why we've seen an extraordinary global flight from fossil fuel investments in the last few years. I don't know if you know, but Exxon, for the first time in its history, just dropped out of the Standard & Poor's 100 because its share price is way down, whereas Tesla's share price is now way up. Example of the recalibration of asset allocation by international investors towards companies they think are going to be, let's call it, future fit or future proof in this context. And in the green bond space and the green finance space, we see many indicators of that. When companies in Europe issue green bonds, they also get a stock price bounce because investors are saying, oh, this company's doing something to be ahead of the policy changes coming through. And so we're going to invest in their equity as well, because we think that means they're less likely to be impacted by this policy volatility that's coming through. And the stock price stays up, by the way, as a rule. So this is what's happening globally. Let me give you a little bit of a flavor of what that looks like for this particular bond market that I'm talking about. We've seen a rapid international growth of green bonds. Now, green bonds are a very simple idea. All it is a use of proceeds bond. That means anyone can issue this bond. A government can issue. We've had Germany close a 6.5 billion euro bond yesterday, where they had 33 billion euros of orders, by the way, extraordinarily successful. And we've also seen energy companies in India like Renew and Greenco and state-owned enterprises like Power Finance Corporation issue green bonds as well in the same format. So whether it's an asset-backed or a corporate or a sovereign bond, the idea is you're using the money in a certain kind of way, and you're promising that you will report every year to show that those activities are still happening. You can't sell off your electrical vehicle fleet 2 months after you issue the bonds. You've got to maintain it for the life of the bond. It's a very simple concept. In fact, this market started with flat pricing. These bonds are exactly the same as other bonds, with only that difference. It's a bit like, Monu, you go and borrow some money from your uncle to buy a car, and the car says, well, Monu, that's okay, I'll give you the money, but I really want you to buy an electric car. You say, I will guarantee it, whatever. Yes, but buy an electric car. Okay. And every year you go back to your uncle and take him for a drive in an electric car. That's all it is. It's a very simple concept. Because it's simple, it's proven very popular with investors. We now have 3, 4, sometimes 11, 14, and 14 times the oversubscription rate for green bonds whenever they're issued around the world. And that applies to all sorts of countries. We've seen significant issuance out of the Philippines over the last year, Thailand. In fact, the Thai government has just closed a major sustainability bond. China is the world's biggest green bond market now, Latin America, etc. You'll see from this slide that there are banks, there are local government institutions that issue bonds. I mean, this is a significant area of opportunity in India that we're talking to the Ministry of Finance about, growing a municipal bond market, and banks and finance institutions. The benefits for issuers are first, investor diversification. As my friend David Rastina says at the Import-Export Bank of India, he got 17% new investors to his bond a few years ago, only 17%. And he said, Sean, if I get more investors to my book, don't you think I can squeeze some price out of it? That's the treasurer view out of it. Now, you might not the first time, you might wait to the second time, but clearly investor diversification is a key treasurer tool to maintain good pricing over time for bond issuance for a program. And that is one absolutely clear benefit of this particular market. For investors, we also have, the thing that's happening to investors, apart from this risk mitigation, is because of the appetite for these bonds as a result of the extra characteristics, we are seeing a capital protection aspect beginning to appear to them, which is now benefiting issuers more directly in terms of pricing. Whenever we get a downturn in this market, green bonds hold their value. They remain liquid, but they don't drop in price. This has happened again and again and again. Throughout the COVID crisis, green bonds have managed to remain, their performance has been strong compared to other kinds of bonds. So what that means now is you get more investors piling into the secondary market, especially who don't even care about the green credentials, who are after the capital protection characteristics. And as Larry Fink at BlackRock once said, he didn't make money by giving people yield. He made money by ensuring they didn't lose money. So the capital protection aspects are gold dust in this market. What that has meant is that in the secondary market, green bonds are a premium product, and they're very, very popular. And that's put downward pressure on primary, wherever we've got that liquidity show up in the secondary market. Our challenge in Indian rupee is lack of liquidity. We need to grow the market a little bit to improve liquidity before we're going to be able to see these characteristics. But I can tell you, in US dollars, in euros, even in currencies like pesos in Chile, we see this price benefit. In pesos, issuers are claiming 8% benefit for the green flavor. In the world's lowest bond price issuer market, the German Bund market, we saw Germany close a 6.5 billion euro bond yesterday, and the interest rate was a negative interest rate. They had the interesting idea of issuing a conventional bond the same day as a green bond to see what happened on price. Now, these are two bonds fully guaranteed by the German state. The only difference is that Germany is promising, cross my heart, to allocate the proceeds to their green programs being run in Germany. And they got a 1 basis point price benefit on the green aspect. We saw this last week with the Swedish sovereign bond. We've seen this with bonds in the middle of the crisis in April from Swisscom and Iberdrola, where they got an extraordinary 30 basis points benefit in the European market. So we see these benefits very clearly in the market beginning to appear. For Indian issuers, it means that if you're able to issue in the international markets, you can get access to this. Now, what we have to see is whether we can create this in the domestic market in India to follow on the international trend. And of course, IIFL will then most likely issue in the domestic market unless we can find a way to get you to go overseas. Let me take you into some Indian examples. This is where first the global distribution of use of proceeds is. When this market started, it was mainly energy, renewable energy in particular. But over the last few years, we've seen a steady growth of building-related issuance, and now transport and water and land use and other measures. Let me just shut this door behind me, which just insists on staying open. I am not working in my office, Monu. I'm actually working in my kitchen. So we're still in a bit of a lockdown phase in the UK. The building sector has been growing dramatically. Fannie Mae is the largest issuer in the world, the US secondary mortgage company, Freddie Mac behind it. So there's an ABS sector. We've seen issuance for bonds issued by banks, by real estate trusts, and all sorts around ASEAN, Australia, China, Europe, and so on. So this is what we want to talk about today. At the moment in the Indian market, and these are all the issuers that have been in the Indian market so far, we only have one, a single, a unitary, a solo, a lone housing-related bond from PNB Housing Finance, which was actually a private placement with the IFC in the very early stages of the market. We've been talking to many people, a lot of banks in India about doing this, and the biggest challenge has been the simple identification of what are qualifying buildings, especially in the international market. So I need to take you into what the international rules look like a bit in this space. These are the new European rules for what can be called a green building. If you want to issue a green bond or a sustainable bond in Europe, or if you just want to disclose to the regulator, as you will have to under regulation coming in Europe, what your sustainable assets are. So every investor of any size, every corporation, every bank in future will be making annual disclosures to the government and to the market about their high carbon. This is the implementation of the Task Force on Climate Finance Related Disclosures, which is an international task force, and sustainable investments. And they will have to use the European taxonomy as the framework to guide that disclosure. And as you can imagine, in Europe, where climate change is a top of the mind issue, sustainability is very popular, and there's already a race to the top with everyone trying to bring out their disclosures. We have 50 major asset managers working on mapping their portfolios to the EU taxonomy already. So the key rule sets, if you like, there's a simple one in the ownership of buildings. This is the whole building aspect. If your building can be shown to be in the top 15% of Mumbai's building stock in terms of its energy efficiency or emissions performance, it qualifies. That will get tougher, by the way. Every 5 years, it gets a little bit tougher. The goal is to move all buildings can be included to zero net carbon by 2050. And one of you will know that's challenging to do in terms of the building environment, but there's a story about how to do it, including the use of renewable energy on rooftops and things like this. But that's the essential rule. Now, the opportunity in IIFL's case is that you've been talking to Edge at the IFC, and it's a qualification tool. It can be used as a proxy. If portfolios meet the Edge rules, they can be immediately used for green bonds. There are other measures like LEED, Gold, and Platinum, and we've had some conversations with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency about new forthcoming Indian labelling schemes and bringing into this. Over the coming year, we hope to have a much clearer set of tools in India to be able to identify housing stock that will qualify with this international measure. This is a measure, by the way, now being used in Colombia, in Chile, in other countries around the world as well. A simple measure. There is a secondary one, which is if people are doing renovations, for example, shopping centres, if they can achieve a 30% improvement in energy efficiency with the renovation cost, then that CapEx will qualify as well. And then for the benefit of the sort of work EESL are doing, there's a whole series of measures which are specific components which qualify, which are what's called white labeled. That is, if you're adding LED lighting anywhere, that loan or that asset qualifies, simple, no measurement required. If you're putting in smart meters, there is a quality of the smart meter threshold, then they will qualify. If you're putting in heat pumps, which of course in Europe is something that's growing, that will qualify, and so on. So the list is actually quite long. I've just given you a few examples. For those people who are lending to components, then this is the way to look at it. And so the European Investment Bank, for example, that has very large lending programs of many billions of dollars towards building components that support energy efficiency, will be able to bring that loan program into their green bond market. So that's the kind of rule set going forward. The goal is to try and harmonize these rule sets around the world. India has been a founding member of what's called the International Panel on Sustainable Finance that Europe convened last year. We now have 50% of the world's economy and population represented in that alliance. It includes China, Indonesia, Chile, and so on. And we're looking at how we can collaborate to harmonize rules to ensure that inter-country capital flows can happen efficiently, easily, with the fewest amount of roadblocks. I mean, we have some capital control issues in India that we still have to discuss. They will actually be discussed as part of that panel. But in the meantime, opportunities already exist. So that's the background, I guess. Just going forward, we are in a crisis. In some ways, from a macro perspective, from a policymaker's perspective, and I said this in an Indian Ministry of Finance a roundtable last week, it is useful to look at the underlying causes of this crisis because it will influence what we do coming out of it. This is actually a crisis of environmental degradation. Pathogens jumping between species, in this case, bat colonies in southern China and northern Myanmar, going to humans, have created a pandemic. This happened with the MERS virus in Egypt a few years ago, but it didn't go beyond epidemic. This one has broken out. It is very clearly something that this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has been talking about for 25 years, a pandemic as a result of degraded environments. We can expect to have many more pandemics this century. That's what the scientists have been telling us for some time now, as well as other climate shocks, such as heat incidences that will kill many people, severe flooding. We saw some in Bangladesh this year. It's going to be a lot worse going forward as sea level rises and as monsoonal activity becomes much more volatile and as cyclone belts move. I mean, Mumbai is going to become a cyclone zone. It already has had its first cyclone, as you know, which will mean that the kind of floods you get will be of a different quality going forward in the past, and that will need adaptation and so on. By understanding the fact that we're actually in a climate crisis, it actually says two things. One is, first, as we re-stimulate our economy, we need to take the opportunity to build back better, in the words of the IMF Managing Director. And that means thinking green, thinking energy efficient, creating assets and buildings that are future fit, not in the old model. That's one. Two, we need to be thinking about resilience of our economies, our societies, and our ecosystems to be prepared for the next crisis. I mean, clearly, that will mean ensuring greater access to health for all, a critical issue in the Indian system. It will mean building in social resilience. It will mean ensuring better housing for all, because what we've learned in the slums of different parts of India is that these things can become disease vectors if we don't provide sensible housing, fair housing for people, and services of all kinds like water. So the housing agenda is not just a part of providing fair and equitable housing for the population of India, it's also part of making the society and the economy more resilient to future shocks. It's one of the reasons I'm here today. It is such a critical part of the recovery we need to do, and it will create jobs. As we have to soak up the unemployment we've created, one of the fastest ways we can do this is significantly boost the housing sector. We need you, Monu, to do a lot more than you're doing now. And we need it to be green. And the opportunity of getting funding and discount funding is very much becoming there now. And that's what the green bond and green finance market is. I'll stop there.
Sure. Thank you, Sean. Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, as always. Once you talk, you start feeling the pain and the aspiration as well. Before we go to the next speaker, I just thought that I'll break it and I'll ask you a few questions. You see, whatever I could gather last time was that the international green bond market is too much reliant on refinance. So most of the projects or most of the bonds were about refinance. That's what I could observe last time around, especially when I saw that Fannie Mae, most of the projects were refinance. Whereas India has a story of to be built, new to be built. One is incremental changes to the old buildings, but India is newly has to be built. And I feel that the input, if it goes to India, it will be much more further impacting that. So do you think there's a way out of this, or the thought has changed that it should not only be refinance, it can also be for new projects, greenfield?
There are many bonds for projects and new projects. Absolutely. Okay. A large chunk of the market. I mean, just bear in mind, bonds as a financial instrument are mainly a refinancing instrument. Right. And that's just the nature of how it fits in the capital stack. Right. So if you're doing project lending or construction lending, you've got to have a greater due diligence capacity. Yeah. Bond investors who are removed from the project tend not to have that. So they're very shy of project stuff, which is why you need institutions like yourselves. You need to essentially create portfolios that can be spun out into the institutional investor market, and you get that capital to do the next crop, if you like. Yes. And that's the way the capital cycle works most efficiently. Sure. However, if you've got the creditworthiness, and this is the challenge, of course, if you've got the creditworthiness, it's absolutely possible, and is happening now, that you will borrow for stuff that you will do over the next 10 years, the next 2 years. The question is, what's the nature, what risk are you providing to the investor? No one's going to buy an asset-backed issuance for stuff that isn't built yet. Yes. But if IIFL is willing to take the organizational risk and can get a good credit rating from CRISIL or someone like that, then it can borrow for future work, absolutely. And we see development banks doing this all the time. It's a big chunk of the market. Sure. So we're into issues unrelated to the green aspect. We're into the sector of how creditworthiness works in the market and who can take what sort of risk.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say this is perhaps something for Mr. Horta to pick up, is that our thinking is, especially in the Indian market, that banks need to change their role. That we need banks to be much more, and financial institutions like IIFL, to be much more on the project lending side, the creation of assets, and farming out to investors, insurance funds and pension funds, the mature assets. So you don't hang on to loans to solar farms. You package them up and sell them off as ABS, or sell off the loans to someone else and recycle the money back into project lending. That's what we're thinking about. And certainly people like Mark Carney in England have spoken about the need for the banking sector globally to recalibrate itself. And this is essentially because the volume of what we have to do to shift our economies to being sustainable, to provide access to all for housing and energy and health and other issues is so great that banks can't do it alone. They have to do it in a close symbiotic relationship with the holders of the big pools of capital, which are the insurance funds and the pension fund. Hope that makes sense, Monu.
Yeah. So one more thing was actually the proxies which you mentioned, whereas the Indian market is actually occupied by IGBC and Greha, which constitutes actually 95% of the project. This was one of the questions from one of the panelists, one of our Green Value partner leaders, Amor, as well. So I think you need to broad base the proxies. I'm sure it is underway because the project, 95% projects are there. They are certified by them. Edge is there, but doesn't have a very deep penetration.
No, you're perfectly right. And that was the conversation we were having with BEE a while ago, which we need to revive again, and others, about how we have comparability for international markets in a way that's visible, transparent and robust, and bring it in. So there's certainly work to be done. And you're perfectly right. At Climate Bonds, we've been slow on this context. We're a small organization. We've been distracted with the European work, which has been, and the Chinese work over the last couple of years, where there's huge strides. You know, Europe has now created a $750 billion recovery fund, which is actually all green.
Okay.
There's a third green infrastructure, but the other 2/3 is about resilience. So we've been doing that. But as India starts to move to recovery out of the COVID crisis, we will be there, and we really want to work with you and with others to be able to now revolutionize the Indian market.
Sure. We'll be very happy if on the academic side also you want us to do some research work to do this, to create more proxies. We'll be happy to do that. If you have to give two suggestions, what we need to take first 2 steps for creating a green finance ecosystem, just 2, what would those be?
We need champions.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step is champions, individuals, frankly, like our panelists today, who have been taking leadership roles in the different institutions to start working for change. And then in the green bond market, what's become clear is large-scale demonstration issuance does galvanize others. And we've seen that. I mean, SBI has done now $850 million equivalent of bonds, of green bonds, for example, and that woke up the market. What's really been working is sovereign issuance. So Germany has brought this bond to market, that closed yesterday, as a way of providing liquidity and benchmark pricing for the thematic bond market in Germany and encouraging a broader market. The French, who've now issued 25 billion euros of green sovereigns, have done it specifically to provide liquidity and demonstration to the market. And they've chosen tenors where there were no, the yield curves were missing from the green bond market. They've had a deliberate focus on architectural measures to build the market. India could do this.
Sure.
In fact, we're in a bit of a campaign, I'm going to tell you, and I'd love your support for it, is that we think India should be doing a major international rupee green bond for international investors, a masala format. And I have investors. We had one on a panel we had in India recently who were saying, please give it to us. The demand is like palpable. India has never done a green sovereign. And as you know, international issuance has not been a hallmark of the Indian history. But this, because of the rupee appetite, which is new, and it's thanks to the extraordinarily low interest rates in places like Japan and the US, Russia. So there's an appetite for yield, which is linked to currency. Then that moment is there in history.
Sure.
China has not done a sovereign green bond yet. India could beat it to it.
Okay, sure. So, so I will take up the challenge to be the influencer here. So we'll pause here, and there's some other questions with Sean, which we'll take later. So now let me have the second panelist on, Shri S.K. Hota. He's the Managing Director of National Housing Bank. Thank you very much, sir, for being on the panel. Uh, he's been a banker of nearly 30 years now, and otherwise he's a postgraduate in agricultural science. So coming from a subject of agricultural science, he's been in the commercial banking for nearly 30 years, and he's the person from the ground, and he's seen it all. And he was also heading a very leading housing finance company also before this appointment came his way. So he's been across functions, across various geographies in the country. So I'm sure there's nobody better than that. And also being into housing industry for so long. So I welcome you, sir, and would like your insights to the as you are the only from the housing side, from the government's side, so to throw some light on what's happening, and how do you see the future ahead for green affordable housing. Off to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Monu. Mr. Son has left some questions for me that also I'll try to address in my the brief. You can interact at the end, but I don't have a formal presentation. I will like to present the way I can as informal as possible. Now, when it comes to the greenhousing, yes, everybody understands it has been the buzzword of late, and more so, particularly with the IT boom in the country, the greenhousing became something like a status symbol. So the people who were the beginners in the IT sector, they started going for the greenhouses, which were offered with some premium, because the premium became a status symbol, and more so in those IT cities, this became quite popular. But what happened is, as the IT sector, the demand went off, uh, and the new recruitments started dropping. Somehow the greenhousing, it was the society started thinking, the public started thinking that it's something which comes at a cost, not for the average Indian. And one more thing is, to be more practical, what happens is we Indians, by and large, the first home buyer, what he looks at is value for money. That is how in India, I think India is the only country where really you can sell a sheep and the ad says, kitna deta hai. So that is where really everything lies. The beginning is we start from the first bargain point will be, how much is the mileage? What is there for me? What is the value? But what happens is, there are simultaneously, Mr. Saurabh Kumar will certainly speak more about this, and he has demonstrated, he's a champion of the cause. We have seen that what happened, that all the people, the average Indian went for changing their bulbs. The average Indian started demanding for a 3-star and 4-star and 5-star fridge and AC, because the energy bill started pinching their pocket. The life cycle cost, they started evaluating. Somehow this has not happened when it comes to housing. It is yet to sink in. We have failed as the people, those who are as Monu or as NHB or as the housing finance companies, the banking system, we have failed to take it to our borrowers, that yes, there is something bigger in store for you. If you are going for a green housing, if you are going for this green leveling, a leveled house, certified house, then how much energy you are going to conserve? How much will be the less water consumption? How much will be, what about the lifestyle, and how about the benefits to your quality of life? These things we have failed to sell as a selling proposition. Now, with this COVID hitting, as Sean was telling, that this is the outcome of all those environmental degradations and whatever we have done with nature. The nature is paying back. And many more are to follow. I think this is the right time that we should push it hard. We can sell greenhouses with a premium, with little extra cost. I think it will be, there is a very solid buying proposition. The time is right. When Swachh Bharat mission was mooted and initiated in the country, there were many naysayers to this. It was a big hit. Now when COVID struck the country, then at least now everybody has felt that yes, if Swachh Bharat was not there, maybe we would have been way behind. Everybody started using a mask. Everybody started using sanitizer, putting on their hand 10 times a day. People stopped traveling in a common public transport. They started cycling back to office. Why all this came? Because the fear of life. It should hit you hard where really it pinches your inner conscience. That is to be aroused. That yes, if you are going for a green housing is something which is not a status symbol. This is the right of every Indian. This affordability has the sustainability of living, sustainability of a housing sector has got nothing to do really with the pricing part. It has to do more with the quality. I think when I used to visit the maternal grandparents' house, today I feel that house was much more green compared to the house where I live in today in New Delhi. Because at least those people, they were following all those, it was naturally ventilated. There was plenty of light and air coming in and going out. They had, even though the formal rooftop your water harvesting was not there, but still then they had all around the greenery, so that, and the cultivation around, it was a sort of like farmhouse where the water leaches into the soil only, and it doesn't flow away. So those were the things what had really gone into our the forefathers. They had these things in mind, but in between what happened is, in the concrete jungle, in the name of providing house for all, and in the mad rush to get 4 walls and a roof, we have compromised on our quality of life. We have compromised on what we deserved. So in the process, the green housing has taken a backseat, because somehow it was created a sort of a myth was created. The green housing is not for all. Green housing is something which is only for the premium class. As Government of India, now in the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, housing for all, wherever anything is there, which is the CLSS component is done directly by the banks. The borrowers are buying a home, constructing their own, or buying a house, where only the subvention component is going. There are 3 more verticals. In these three verticals, whether it is the AHP, where the PPP model is there, or even for that matter, the slum rehabilitation, in all those things, government is trying to bring in new technology, a bit of compliance to the green building code. In all those, it is the BMTPC is in working along with the Ministry of Housing. They have got a corpus. There is a technology submission under the mission of housing for all. There is a submission for technology, new technology in housing. Not that, now a 5th vertical of under this PMAY has come. That is the affordable rental housing complexes. In this, to make it affordable, there is a TA component, and that technological assistance is being funded by Minister of Housing to make it a bit affordable, so that some part of the cost is borne by the Government of India. That apart, NHB is committed to provide cheaper refinance for all those projects, affordable housing complexes, which are meant for the migrant workers. So there is so many initiatives, but at the end, what happens when it comes to the builder-driven construction of houses, these are state laws come into operation. Many states have given, I found that some of the states, they are giving extra FSAs, 7.5% or 10% FSAs with the green leveling. And NHB with KFW, we had a 50 million project quite some time back, which worked well. The target was something like 30% energy saving, but the result was 34%. Encouraged by that, now the present one more program we are running, that is with the AFD. AFD and the European Union is working with us. It's a 100 million euros project, where part of the amount is drawn, and Monu is one of the really leading HFCs who has also participated in this program. But not many are there, really, not many takers are there as of now, because they feel that no, green housing cannot be sold. So who to be blamed in this? In the entire game, in my opinion, it is the housing finance companies, it is NHB, it is the banks, all of us who are at the helm of affairs. We need to promote, we need to educate, we need to have more number of seminars where we discuss with the builder community, with CREDAI, with NAREDCO, and try to provide bit cheaper finance or refinance to the sector, so that the green leveling becomes, it is accepted by all. Under this project of Sunref, which is with AFD and European Union, NHB is taking the entire cost of leveling cost, the green rating cost. And that apart, it is meant for EWS, LIG, as well as for the MIG segment. But the EWS, the economically weaker section, and the low income group, for them, that is income up to 6 lakhs, that category should be minimum 50%. That is to be ensured by NHB. Like with the green bonds, someone was telling that it will come with some conditions. Like similarly, any multilateral agency, when they are investing in when they are putting money in the country, certainly it will come with some the missions, the objectives of that particular program. So 50% of these funds should go to the economically weaker section, but there is no traction from that particular segment as of now, because the private builders, even though close to something like 6,000 projects are registered with IGBC, but I don't know, those are mostly for commercial. Residential houses, the housing projects which are completed and which are green leveled are not as many. It needs to grow. We, as an institution, NHB is certainly willing to, and we are playing a role. Very recently, one more development I would like to say that yes, for the project finances, particularly affordable housing projects, we are considering that yes, we will provide the funding support to the housing finance companies. Of course, it will be again in a refinance route. That Monu may say that yes, whatever is available to us is in the refinance route. Of course, when institutions like NHB are engaging, we will be engaging only in the refinance way. That is one thing. So it's all, I think, going forward, green is you have to go green. You don't have an alternative, you don't have a choice. We must work towards it. Unless we work towards it, I think it will be difficult really. And we don't know that how many after COVID-19, whether another COVID-20 or 21 is coming.
Yep.
So that has to be really sold to the market. That has to be sold to the end customer, end buyer, that what is the value for him. That is to be sold. And one point certainly Sean was telling about the attracting the long-term funds, whether it is pension funds, whether it is your the insurance money into the project finance. And housing finance companies should engage more in creation of stock. I agree fully that we are supposed to, housing finance companies and the banking system is supposed to fund the individual houses, and simultaneously you must engage also in the creation of stock. If we don't create this stock, then where from those individual houses, green leveled houses will come? The dwelling unit will come only when you fund the projects.
Yeah.
So it's something like egg first or chicken first, like that. But you need to, and we are encouraging particularly the mid-sized housing projects. We want, if those are green leveled, NHB is offering right now for all our refinance. For 1 year reset, the rate is sub 6. For a 3 year reset, it is sub 7. And for a greenhousing, there is a 10 basis point further concession we are giving. I think there is no better time than this. And if not now, then when we shall wake up. So there is, I have really left many to be answered by Monu and the committee of
Yes.
our housing finance companies
Yes.
that directly we are in touch. And I suppose, yes, we will be presenting a better picture of the country. We will be working towards the betterment of the countrymen. And greenhousing, if it has to be there, yes, we are there to play our role.
Sure.
Thanks, Monu.
Thank you very much, sir. A few things I just wanted to share with you, sir. So we did some market research with the consumers, and just to say that how did they react and were they really aware of this greenhousing as a concept? I think it was surprisingly, they were overwhelmingly concerned and they were very much pro greenhousing as a concept. So I think the demand is there, but it's like we're assuming that they don't care about it, but they don't have a product, so it doesn't happen. So I think demand is already there. That's the sense we could get with consumer awareness very much there. They're wanting those houses out there. Few things which I feel which are very elementary and basic, which can be done, sir. I will just use this forum to, to mention
Yeah,
that.
please.
For example, it was very heartening to see HSBC very recently, HSBC India very recently launched a green deposit scheme. So wherein they said that this is something amazing, right? And they said that if individuals or corporates want to give fixed deposits and they have a green deposit, so the proceeds of this would go to specific projects, and which are could be anything, could be energy, could be housing, could be anything. But this was like I was quite amazed to read about it last week. So it's quite amazing to see that. I was just saying, for example, when we go to the banking sector, they're actually agnostic to this idea. They're not even aware of sensitive about, is there something known as a green affordable housing as a separate line? It's housing finance, and that's where it ends. We need to create a sub classification for them, and maybe like priority sector incentives which we just announced, this also possibly needs to come in and fit in there. If you're funding a green affordable housing project, that could also be a priority sector thing for you to look at, because I think this is where how things will get started, and this is how things will get sorted. But for sure, like Sean said, it's like, first of all, the ecosystem of benchmark and controlling and monitoring is extremely important. As you mentioned, sir, in IGBC, there are a lot of projects which get signed up, pre-certified as they were going to do green, but somewhere along the way, they go off track or they don't do it. So it does happen. So you needed that's when we started Kutumb. Sean, we first started only about awareness. We said, okay, we'll educate, what is it? But then later on, we realized they were excited, they wanted to do it, but there was nobody to handhold them to see the process through. That's when we conceptualized Green Value Partner, which is green architects in our own company, who will, if you're interested, we will walk you the path. Because we realized right from design stage to conceptualization and execution and materials, who's going to help them through. So creating that ecosystem of that capacity building of people to be able to walk through. A lot of times we all know what is good for us, but we don't know how to do it. So we thought that then GVP could be the way to say how to do it. So one thought was that, sir. The other aspect could be an Indian taxonomy of its own as well, because India is a very diverse country, and maybe the EU taxonomy may not totally resonate to this, and bringing it to that level that globally it's acceptable as well. So I'm sure having consensus and acceptability globally will be there. So I think that's a very, very important criteria as well to be worked upon. So possibly, sir, I feel is that affordable housing has also got to do with the cost aspect. As you said, the land cost has been a concern in India for providing housing. And actually, in the last webisode, Prashant Kapoor mentioned very interestingly that when more FAR are actually being given for land, actually it is increasing the land cost, because the landlord thinks that now you can construct more, so I'll want more money. So actually, you have created a higher density area, and the land prices actually have gone up further. So he was counterintuitive to the idea of providing additional FAR. I don't know how much does that theory will hold, but overall, I think, sir, it's been very encouraging in the last 2 years at least, that we see that not only with NHP but otherwise Ministry of Housing also, we see the green shoot. But I think some basic things like green affordable housing under priority sector could be one, sir, and NHB encouraging construction loans for creating the stock of green. So I think it's something if it can be done would really help the cause. Your final words, and then I'll move on, sir.
Yeah, yesterday's the new set of priority sector definitions. I think there is so many changes. We are moving in the right direction. It will be incremental always, and you should appreciate the increments that is coming your way. We should not be demanding everything at a time. Of course, something is delivered, after that you demand the next increment. It is within your right. But RBI seized of the situation, and they are, of course, they are changing the norms to accommodate whatever is demanded by the industry. And the demand of housing finance sector in particular, both the finance ministry, the DFS and the RBI, they've been really quite receptive of whatever we have demanded. In our previous meetings, we were party to that when the COVID struck the country. That during the lockdown, all of us were meeting, and we had demanded so many things, and including the special liquidity facility that the sector required. So yes, we are moving in the right direction, but you need to have patience as far as a specific inclusion of the green housing in that. One point I told you, yes, we are giving a discount. Right. If it is a even pre-certified, we are giving the discount. Only thing is you need to complete and get the certificate.
Yes.
If the certificate doesn't come, then we will stop our further funding in those cases. If it is individual home loans, we are giving a refinance. Again, there is a 10 bips discount. I told you about the other thing that very recently, it is yet to be notified. We have already approved. We are coming out with a refinance scheme for the project loans. That is what Son was exactly telling, that how to encourage the stock creation.
Yes.
Because retrofitting the existing stock becomes little difficult. You can do very minimum. Whereas launching, the new launches have to increase. New launches should be green from day one. Then what will happen? Maybe the leftover 30-40% what you told of the housing requirement, that should be green.
Yes.
And another thing is our focus is not on really all those big 4,000, 5,000 or 10,000 unit projects. Our focus is on the small projects for the small man.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That is where really HFCs with a limited balance sheet size, they can play a role.
Yes.
And we are willing to really support them. And even those smaller projects, the 100 unit project, a 200 unit project can be green.
Yes.
You can have all. Another thing is in the entire concept of this energy conservation, there is one more thing is the complex should be closer to the workplace.
Right.
Suppose it is for the migrant labor, the affordable rental housing complexes, which the government is has declared under the Atmanirbhar package as the 5th vertical of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. If it is for migrant laborers, you cannot house them outside the city limit. They have to be somewhere within the city limit. And you won't get for a 4,000 unit project.
Yes.
The space won't be available. It will be a smaller space somewhere.
Yes. Yes.
So,
perfect.
Yeah, you should go for the HFCs must go now for those 100 unit, 200 unit projects. Leveling will be easy. Completion will be easy. The transportation cost, the fossil fuel cost will come down. Unnecessarily, you are spending so much on their transport, that will come down. Sure. Unless these houses are built close by that where they go to fetch their daily wage, I think nobody will buy these properties. If I am working in India Habitat Center, then I had to be in Jankpura Extension, where it is a 10-minute drive for me.
Yeah.
So my driver also should be in a 4 or 5 kilometer or at least 20 minutes drive. If you put him somewhere else, then certainly he won't like to take that accommodation, isn't it? So
Agreed, sir. So thank you so
going
much.
forward, I think you have to go for the smaller units, smaller projects with 100, 200 units, which
Yes,
where the cell velocity is faster, construction cost will be less, and you can deliver really a 500 square feet or 600 square feet. If it is a 30 or 60 square meter dwelling unit, you can deliver at the same cost in a 100 unit project. What really a premium builder demands in a bigger project. Another thing is you cannot blame really the developer community, because they deliver what sells, where demand is. Always the creator will create to the demand that exists in the market. We need to create the demand.
Yeah.
As bankers, we need to create the demand, educate the customer. Awareness. No point in time awareness will be complete. You need to create awareness. There has to be a demand created. If the demand is created, the developer will be forced to deliver, create those stocks. When the developer launches new projects, you will have again opportunity to fund those projects. And you will come to me and I will have opportunity to support you.
Yeah.
It's a chain.
That's Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. So now I would like to thank you, Mr. Saurabh Kumar, for patiently waiting. So although he doesn't need any introduction, but just for the benefit of some of you or a repetition, he's an electric engineer from IIT Kanpur, a master's in public policy from National Graduate Institute of Policy Studies from Tokyo, Japan. Somebody who started his career into the telecom sector way back in '89. He got selected in the Indian Revenue Service in '92, and for next 10 years he stayed there. And then in 2002 he moved to Ministry of Power, Government of India, as Deputy Secretary. He was in charge for the Budget and Finance wing with the task of appraising large power projects for the government investments. And then he was also heading the Bureau of Energy Efficiency also. And the most coveted, one more coveted achievement of his has been when he was appointed as the MD of Energy Efficiency Services Limited by the Ministry of Power in May 2013. So it's been a phenomenal journey, sir. And he's been the pioneer and of conceiving the Unnat Jyoti by affordable appliances and LEDs for all, which is called the famous Ujala program, which has not only got national but international acclaim as well of what under his guidance and leadership we've been able to achieve. So, sir, just wanted your a bit about the journey of this, because we feel that what you were in 2013 for that in that movement, I think green affordable housing in the very similar watershed movement. So possibly your journey and your leadership would surely give us insights you started and how you made it such a big success, and maybe we could take some cues from there, sir. So off to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ratra, and it's indeed a pleasure to be a part of this very prestigious panel. If you allow me, can I start off with an anecdote?
Absolutely, sir.
So many years ago, I was a, as you read out in Power Ministry, I was a nice government babu, and we were taken to we went on a official trip to a Southeast Asian country. And I had very little knowledge on, and so I was given a write-up to speak, and I was supposed to be speaking on a panel. And I was the fifth speaker. And as you know, in Southeast Asia, if you speak for about 5 minutes, they take about 6 minutes or 7 minutes to translate, and which was the normal course, and it was going on. Finally, I got my chance to speak, and I rattled off for about 3-4 minutes, and the interpreter finished it in about 1 minute or so. I was very happy. I again continued reading from the text and rattled off for another 3 or 4 minutes, and the translator took exactly 30 seconds, and I was again asked to speak. Finally, I I spoke for the next 2 or 3 minutes, and the translator actually just said a couple of words, and people were clapping. So I thought I did a brilliant job. I asked one of the organizers what was that lady saying. So when the first time I spoke, the lady said, look, this has been spoken by speaker number 1, 3, and 4. So I did not translate and waste everybody's time. Next time when I spoke, he said that looks like there's nothing new that is going to emerge out of this. So anyway, so let me pause there. Finally, she said, when I finished, that I told you so. So I have a similar thing today on a subject which I really don't know much, and more importantly, I'm speaking after 2 great stalwarts have spoken through. But let me try my 2 cents of things. So I will talk about 3 things which I feel after listening to the experts like Sean and Mr. Hota. And I'll pick up something that Sean said, and that's really, really important. How can we make things simple? The moment things are simple, the interest goes up. I mean, simple and green. And to my mind, we have so far focused largely on the demand side of a sustainable housing or sustainable building. We have not looked at the supply side of it, because if you see sustainable housing, it's not just efficient equipments or energy efficiency or building management system. It's also about affordability of energy supplied to that housing complex. I know it is what I'm saying doesn't immediately would register because we are used to the fact that we put up a building plan and we construct a building, and then we ask for a license, and we ask for connections, and then the local distribution company will come up and put up transformers and what all has to be done. But can we set up a model where the developer also puts together a combination of renewable energy, battery storage, and maybe instead of a diesel engine, a gas-based backup / solution? And can there be a building management or energy management system that is able to optimize the 3 things together? Yes, I know land is an issue. We are also told about the fact that battery costs are very high. But let me give you an example, and I'll pick up what Mr. Hota says. Let's presume it's a 100 dwelling unit complex that you're creating. And let's presume that every house needs about 2.5 kilowatt of load. So we're talking about 2 megawatt, maybe at maximum 2.5 megawatt. We need about 1.5 hectares of land if we were to do 100% solar. Yes, land availability is a challenge, but maybe not immediately next to the building complex, but maybe about 5 to 6 kilometers away, some place which is not a cultivable land. And there you put battery storage along with it. We are doing a similar project in Maharashtra. And let me tell you, not for dwelling units, but it's a slightly different project where we are using the land of the government, which is not being used, primarily of the distribution generation companies and Gram Panchayat. And we are putting together small solar plants between 0.5 megawatt to 10 megawatt. And we are feeding directly to the 11 kV substation at the demand center. The tariff that we have is 3 rupees. Now we have proposed to the state of Maharashtra and many other states that we would like to upgrade the rural infrastructure by putting in batteries, adding LED streetlights, providing households efficient LEDs, efficient cooking. All that we can do. And if we get money from tariff support, the tariff only goes up to about 3.90 rupees. Now imagine if you are able to do this in a building complex in anywhere, and you give a tariff of 4 rupees, which is levelized for 25 years, which means the tariff is not going to change for the next 25 years. It is really going to make an enormous difference. The challenge here is there are several entities that are involved. there is, and I'll come to the financing part later, but you have the developers, you have the municipal bodies, you have the distribution companies, the electricity companies. Is there a way in which you can get them all together? Monu, and you also mentioned about electric mobility. Now, yes, battery costs are high, but if I can put a battery instead of a diesel genset, of course, the capital costs are high. But once we are migrating to let's say electric mobility, I can use the same battery to charge my car. It's a revenue model that I create additionally. Also, I can store power. Today, all of us who are there in the energy and renewable energy space in India, while a lot is being said that we are doing quite a lot, 175 gigawatts, but if you see the enormous problems that the renewable energy generators are facing, and the problem rests on the fact that when they generate the maximum between 10 a.m. and maybe 4 p.m., the country doesn't have enough demand to take them. Now, all the renewable tariff is a single part tariff. And if so, which means if I don't take power, I will not pay the generator. The concept of deep generation is coming, essentially to compensate so the fact that we have a 244 rupee power, which we are very happy about, very good, absolutely nothing wrong in that. But the fact is that 244 rupee power comes at the bus bar of the distribution company. By the time it reaches the consumer, it is already about 5 rupees and more because of the inefficiency, the transmission losses, the transmission charges. Here, what we are proposing is a generation next to the demand center itself. I'm cutting through the entire stuff. So it is certainly possible. Number two, so this is one part that we are working on, and we'll be happy to engage with anyone who feels we can try out this model on a pilot basis. Number two, if you look at any renewable energy financing, ultimately, or renewable energy tariff, almost 60% of the tariff is interest rate. And that's where it was very interesting to note when Sean mentioned that the green bond actually got a differential lower tariff rate. A 1% reduction in interest reduces my tariff by about 20 paisa. Now, so if I'm able to develop this kind of a market in India, where some premium is given to green, and for banks, and again, this is for Mr. Hota and RBI to mull over, that if there is a green project, maybe it's certified by someone, maybe give 1 or 2% reduced interest rate. Maybe cross-subsidize it from a thermal power project. I mean, I'm just laying this. So some policy directives need to come in to favor green, and that's really important. And the third aspect is the issue of policy application. Now, we all know there is an energy conservation building code, and Sean mentioned about his discussions with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Yes, it is there, but to my mind, it is far too complex for a simple person to understand. It's a detailed technical document which only architects can understand. And I have been trying to engage with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency exactly on the point that Mr. Hota mentioned when he recounted what his grandparents' houses look like. Let's look at any fort. I mean, we've all gone to Agra Fort. Have you seen what technologies have been used to make that building completely green? So, so what I have been trying to say is that it is not that if I only construct a building using this code, will my building be green? There are hundreds of other ways in which I can achieve that same result. The key issue is how would you measure or how would you certify that a building is green? And for me, it's a very simple matrix. A simple matrix is benchmark based on data. If there is an office building centrally air conditioned, if it is a 12-hour operation, then your building will be efficient if your energy performance index, which is energy used per square meter per month or per year, whatever you may call it, is X. Now it is very easy to monitor. It is very easy to validate. You don't need anyone to do this. If you have a smart meter, it is very simple. You get the consumption data on a real-time basis. You know the square meter area of that building. Anyone can certify this. And my last point would be, if there is were to be a certification, and why I'm saying this, I'm not really a big fan of subsidizing or tax incentives, because that doesn't really work in the long run. It actually distorts the market. Non-fiscal incentives actually play a very vital role. So if I have a certified green building, allow me a higher FAR, allow me maybe some reduction in the house tax, allow me some rebate in the electricity tariff. So there are many ways in which you don't need to use precious public capital upfront, but can still drive the change. And of course, I agree with virtually everyone that yes, awareness has to be at the heart of it. So let me finish here. What I mentioned is new business models, new ways of looking at sustainable housing, be some sort of a differentiator in terms of financing, see some sort of a simpler certification of the building that you have. And that's about it, and non-fiscal incentives that you can push in along with awareness. I think this is something that can really fly very quickly. So let me thank you once again and stop here.
Thank you so much, sir. But I won't get you off the hook. I still want to understand, sir, this Ujala program. How, because I'm sure there would have been various facets to it, like we are talking of green affordable housing, policy, financing, other departments. So how did this, in briefly, if you can say that, how do you lay out this strategy for moving ahead with this program and how it scaled up? Something you would like to mention quickly on this, because it wouldn't have been easy. Although I understand it was a government aided thing, but still wouldn't have come so easy. And arranging financing also for that.
Yeah. No, again, I'll repeat what Sean said, and it's not difficult. Our program was very simple. Right. It is pay as you save. You don't know about LED bulb. LED bulbs are very costly. Doesn't matter. What we communicated to people that yes, if you replace your CFL and use an LED, every month you will save about 15 rupees, presuming a 4-hour usage. You pay me 10 rupees through the electricity bill. So it was simple messaging. We took LEDs close to people, which means it was easy for them to take up. There was no transaction cost because the payment was added to the electricity bill. So there was no additional thing that was done. So that's exactly what I'm trying to mention. If we can create a simple, seamless, and low transaction cost structure, where we not just add the cost of capital cost of housing, but also its operational cost, and give it as a package to people, it is very, very scalable. I mean, if you look at a building, the initial cost and the cost of energy over a 40-year period, the cost of energy is about 70%. So if you put this together as a package as we did, it is very much possible to scale this up in this country, or for that matter anywhere else. Yes, it has not been tried many places, but there is no harm in trying.
So, and I think you said a very important point, and I think that's very, very critical, is that we said that why should we have only a one way of evaluating to say this is energy efficient building only. The complexity of these things, I totally agree with you. While we have been undergoing this program and trying to deconstruct and tell people how to make it, it's a hell of a task, right? So I totally agree with you, but I'm sure it's a much bigger question that how will it fly in the international community? Maybe Sean can say that, okay, we have our own measure of evaluating the energy savings. It's not the proxies which are defined, but something else which is equally validated by that. So, and also as you mentioned about the project, when last time we met some time back, I think you mentioned about the same thing, and we would be very keen to pick up as a pilot with some of the developers, which you had said that you're providing, IESL is getting into project AMC, and you will run it. You had two variants in that. Either you could one time or could do it as an AMC also for life, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. So for all the common areas, the street lightings, the common areas of the buildings. So it's a phenomenal idea. And surely, sir, we'll come back to you and we'll try one project out, and we will convince some developer to try this out. So
Sure.
I would just take some questions which have been queued before we move ahead. So the first question, I'll take it. So there's one developer from Sipani Properties. So he's saying, let us know what discount the government or the finance company of the builder is providing to buyers of green flats to encourage the same. I think Mr. Hota has already mentioned it in terms of the incentive which is there. So I think this stands answered. And then Mr. Prabhakaran is talking about, are there incentives offered for affordable housing? As mentioned by Sunref, we are unable to reach Sunref team in India. Kindly requesting to support as well, please. So Mr. Prabhakaran seems to be from an housing finance company. So we will do the needful and we'll send the contacts there as well. Where is the green building market heading in India considering impact of COVID-19 event? What are the challenges affecting the green market in India? What are the green financing products that are prevalent in the Indian context other than green bonds? Please confirm whether the policies for green building or green building finance are actually getting implemented, or is it just on paper? So I don't know. So maybe some bit, I think, Sean, you can take, where is the green building market heading in India considering impact of COVID-19? Would you like to summarize it in some brief manner?
Sure. Well, we need to create jobs. We need to boost housing as a way of creating jobs. We need to make sure it's green to address the other measures that are critically important for us going forward, including just saving costs of people to make sure energy costs are down. But sustainable housing is part of it. So if you think about all those, and you have a government that's conscious of stimulating out of the COVID crisis, learning from the COVID crisis, the role of poor housing in disease spread is a critical learning out of this COVID crisis. What you're going to be able to say is, we're going to be doing a lot of housing work in the next few years. And we're going to have a very strong green emphasis. I suspect there will be incentives coming through, at least in the capital market side from RBI, and as Saurabh suggested. But the area where it's going to be really interesting is not at the government incentive side in making this work. It is those joining up of different kinds of activities that Saurabh was mentioning. And I really enjoyed your comments there, because I think that is absolutely right. How do we pull together different parts of our system to create the sustainable housing stock that we can then lend to and refinance through the green bond market is the sort of question. So rule sets are important. Monu, while I agree with you, there's different ways of assessing what happens. In a sense, it doesn't matter. What counts is, again, sorry, I've said it so beautifully, I'm going to quote him on my conference next week, make things simple. If we can make things simple, go. Financial markets thrive on commoditization. So don't say we've got different rule sets, ours is good, and compete against them. Bring them all together and get a common approach. And that's the kind of conversation we're trying to have with MOF and BEE. And by the way, the Ministry of Finance is starting to think about doing a taxonomy for India. It's on the agenda, and over the next year, I think it will come through, and it'll be part of the international dialogue. So just to let you know that is actually part of that agenda. So this is going to be a growth area. It's also going to be a growth area at the end of the day, because consumers are beginning to wise up. Especially middle class consumers that do understand that their heating bills could be lower with a simple little bit of a change in the construction stage and the architectural change. And you already see a lot of developers in places like Mumbai advertising their green homes. How green they are, I'll leave that to Monu and Saurabh to comment on in some of these cases. But it's already becoming a marketing edge in many markets because of the consumer side. You put all of these things together, this is a growth sector. It's a growth sector even without artificial government incentives. And if we do bring in targeted, fiscally efficient, let's keep them efficient. Tax is not usually very fiscally efficient incentives, then that will only help. It won't be what's needed to make it happen.
Sure, sir. Thank you. So one question, Mr. Saurabh Kumar, for you. EESL has been involved with aggregation and implementation of energy efficient equipment, supporting the end user or the customers. When will we see EESL supporting the builder group in procuring bulk material directly from EESL rather than managing the product aggregation? Can we link EESL procurement process to RERA compliance or green certification compliance?
As of yesterday, happy to help anyone who wants to take our help, use our prices, use our quality systems. As of yesterday, we'll be very glad and happy to help.
Sure, sir. Now, Mr. Hota, this is for you, sir. Over the years, NHB had done the tremendous job for affordable housing sector, and they are still doing it without doubt. What do you think of NHB will continue to support green affordable housing after Sunref program? If yes, then what are the challenges do you foresee in terms of policies to be adopted or changed? More importantly, do you think the incentivization of sustainable development will benefit? This is from Akshat Agarwal. What after Sunref is his question, and what challenges you foresee?
Sunref was a sort of pilot project where AFD came jointly with the European Union, and it was again at the government level, at Department of Economic Affairs and DFS both, they had played a role. This involves two things. One is if 100 million euros of finance, and there is a another fund for the TA component for reducing the rate of interest to make the rate of interest softer. And CRISIL is working as the partner in Sunref program to propagate and to help drive green technology and to create that awareness. They had in Bombay, they had one seminar. In Delhi, they had one seminar last year. And on the day before yesterday, I suppose they had one builders meet in Jaipur, which was a virtual meet. But these are the programs which are just to show the way. But going forward, as such, NHB has got its own refinance program. That is what I was telling, that for affordable housing projects, we are willing to give refinance. We are working on the direction of creating a securitization market, a secondary mortgage market, where we can attract the funds from the long-term funds from whether it is the pension funds or from the insurance funds, all those corpus we can attract. So Sunref is the beginning only. But NHB's role as far as funding affordable housing and funding affordable green housing, this will continue. Certainly, I will thank Mr. Saurabh Kumar that how to differentiate between the usual finance and a green housing finance. As of now, we are giving the rate differential is 10 basis point. That is the benefit we are passing on. We'll have to evaluate. We'll see that what else we can do to really encourage the affordable housing going green.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
It's not going to stop anyway.
Sorry. Sean, this is for you. This is from Siddharth Shukla. He's saying that, hi, Sean, how are you? What are the capital protects and how do you see India to develop such aspects?
Well, it's a bit of a vague question, I have to say. What are the projects that are relevant to addressing our environmental challenges in India is one way to answer that question. And that is going to be a low carbon transport. We need to upgrade the Indian railway system and make it fit for intercity travel and avoid building freeways and go to high-speed trains like being built between Ahmedabad and Mumbai, for example. That's one area of work. We need to make sure that our existing building stock is way, way more efficient. And part of that is retrofitting, but other part of that is changing our whole appliance universe, such as the work of ESL is doing, that area. We need to make sure that our agriculture can be more resilient in the face of what I'm going to call water shocks of the future. We're expecting the monsoon to largely fail every year in 1 in 5 years in the future. That means we have to have a lot more water storage capacity around northern India, especially, to be able to cope with those kinds of changes. So there's a massive infrastructure job that's got to be done. And frankly, we're going very slowly. The Ganga Valley Commission needs to get its act together, frankly, and so on. We need to improve the waste situation in our Indian cities. We need to Our sewage has got to be managed way better than we're managing it now, but also just the collection of waste, recycling of and so on. There's a massive job to be done there. And I can go on and on and on before I get to the glorious task of building cities that are fit for the children of our future, which they're not at the moment. They're frankly not at the moment. I mean, how crazy is it that we've got still slums all over the place when we can do affordable housing? We know how to do it. It's crazy. How crazy is it that we have tower blocks in our big cities that bring in water by trucks sometimes because we haven't got the infrastructure to probably serve our cities? How crazy is it that we have such disparities in availability of access to just simply shelter, let alone energy, in a country that has got so much to offer the world, like India? There's a job to be done here, and in each of these areas there's a massive infrastructure job. So look, I don't know whether that's what you want me to say, but what I can tell you is that we're in a unique point in history, an unbelievably unique point in history, which is the cost of capital in large slabs of the world is effectively zero. We have the most amazing arbitrage opportunity here. Because if you think about it, when we've got to build out a new India that we can be proud of for our children, the capex is vast and the capital costs are low. It is the moment in history to do it. Now, of course, we need our bankers to help us a bit with that arbitrage opportunity, to make sure we get better access to the low cost pools of capital around the world. That is the job now. But whilst I will talk to you for ages about the horrors we face with climate change, I can also tell you that at this moment we are incredibly lucky, unbelievably lucky, because we know what to do. There is no shortage of common sense advice about what we have to do and knowledge and engineering, and we have the capital. How lucky are we?
Yep. Thank you so much. And I think just one final word from each of you. We'll start with Saurabh Kumar and then we conclude, sir.
No, I think the pandemic has shown that things need to be, all of us have changed. Things have changed. In fact, people call before March, BC, before Corona. That is the kind of expression that are being used. I think we need to ponder and see that the silos that we have worked on and the way things are going on for centuries, particularly for the electricity sector, now needs to change very dramatically. And decentralized power is really the need of the hour, if you ask me, to decarbonize, to make sure that you get a resilient and green infrastructure. So there is a new way of thinking that is needed. And as ESL, this is how we have survived all this time. We have never thought traditionally, we have thought differently, and somehow we have been lucky to be here. And I have no reason to believe that we can't, as a community, do something in a much different way. So let me thank IIFL Monu Ratra, and always a pleasure talking to Sean and Mr. Ho. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Mr. Hota, sir, so from you, sir, the final word, sir.
Thanks, Monu, that you brought me on this panel, and I got the opportunity to listen to Sean and Saurabh Kumar, sir. One thing I will tell that, yes, as NHB, the pre-COVID and post-COVID, that is prior to March and today what we are doing, I presume and I hope that more number of individual home loan refinance when it comes to me, more number of project finance when it comes to me for refinance, more number of HFCs and banks when they approach NHB, they will be approaching for refinancing the green projects and green houses, green buildings. As far as NHB is concerned, yes, certainly, as Saurabh Kumar sir told, we will be engaging with the government as well as the international community, SON and others, and the Reserve Bank of India, that whatever policy interventions are required to really promote green housing, we will be doing. We had been engaging with Deputy UK for some demonstration projects. We had 3, which are already delivered in last 2-3 years. One is in UP, one in Bihar, and one in Orissa. Still, it is a job in progress. We are on the job. I think going forward, we need to do much more than what we have been doing so far. I think we are still the starters as of now. We need to run the full marathon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sean, the final words from you, sir.
I work on climate change. 40% of the emissions that we have to reduce to address climate change are in the built environment.
Yep.
The largest slab of the world's future emissions on the current trajectory are in India. Green buildings, low emission buildings in India are probably the pivot to address global climate change. The pivot. You, my friend, are in the center of the storm. And of course, you, my friend, are in the center of the solution and the opportunity for the planet to do something. It's a big burden, but a big opportunity because of the things I mentioned before. I just want to stress, I know it's hard in practice to bring all of these people together, to get these projects out the door. There are so many factors. All I'm going to say is there is no more important task on the planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think your words morally put a lot of responsibility on the shoulders of citizens of this country. We'll do our best. We'll continue to do these engagements. Basis the inputs which we have got, we'll put together a white paper and try to send to the relevant ministries and seek help from Hota sir and Mr. Saurabh Kumar as well. And we'll also upgrade ourselves and try to be more influential in making this change. Thank you so much to all of you. And we hope to have another one pretty soon. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.